Okay. So, welcome everyone. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge and celebrate the first Australians on whose traditional lands we meet and work, and whose cultures are among the oldest continuing cultures in human history. We're all in a virtual space at the moment, so I'm actually on Ngarigu land that extends from the Monaro Plains and into Victoria. So I'm on the outskirts of the Queanbeyan and Palerang region. So this is the first seminar presented by the new Materiality Agency and Data Research Hub. And the conveners are myself, Dr. Erica Seccombe, Dr. Christina Clarke, and Mr. Roderick Bamford. And they are my exciting and esteemed colleagues who are very much involved in this area of research. So I thought I'd let you know a little bit about research hubs. The Research Hub falls within the ANU School of Art and Design, and it brings together academics to address big ideas and urgent issues of our nation and beyond. And building on core strengths and shared concerns, the hubs provide focal points for our researchers to connect and collaborate. So you might be familiar with the fabulous Nature Culture Research Hub that's been going for some time, led by Raquel Omella and Rebecca Mayo. And that's been a really important group to be part of. And now there's, if you look on the School of Art and Design Research Hub page, you'll see how many research hubs there are. So our group, the Materiality Agency and Data Research Group, is concerned with relationships between materiality, data and their agencies in art, craft, design and the humanities. And researchers investigate materially embedded data and how its digital abstractions are activated, mediated, organised and communicated through creative disciplines, examining how those practices engage communities and influence historical and contemporary cultures irrespective of time and space. So I won't go too far into the details of materiality and data. You can look at it online, and hopefully we'll be having a lot more series and getting together and talking about each other's research and how it's relevant to that cause. And of course, this is why it's fantastic to introduce Martyn Jolly, who is an esteemed colleague, was actually my supervisor for my PhD. So he's been a fabulous mentor, but he's also been the head of the photography in media arts for many, many years, until he's taken up an Australian Research Council Discovery Grant. And this is to lead the international project Heritage in the Limelight, the Magic Lantern in Australia and the world. And among other things, he has done a lot of things and published books. Now, Martyn and his colleague Elissa de Corsi, who's here as well, they have been instrumental in bringing magic lanterns back to the limelight and through performance. And if any of you have had that experience of seeing them reproduce those performances of magic lantern slides, it is one of the most incredibly engaging and effective performance I've seen in a really long time, that's not using new digital media, but actually thinking about how we interact with images and what they mean to us, and also what a collective experience is in the way that heritage can be brought alive. And I've learned so much from their project. So at the moment, just before Martyn begins, I'll just let you know that he has an amazing show on at Canberra Museum and Gallery at the moment. It's going to be closing next week on the 5th of September, but he's got a floor talk that you can book into, which is on the 3rd, isn't it, Martyn?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wednesday. Yeah, between 1 and
Wednesday. Yeah, you have to book because of we're in.
It's a COVID thing. You don't have to pay or anything.
No, it's free. But if you want to do something in person, I really recommend it. I would be going to, except that I'm lecturing, so I am sad about that, but I've seen the show and it is absolutely fabulous. So Martyn,
yep.
I'm going to let you take the floor now.
Okay.
And
right, I'm just going to share the screen and make sure that my PowerPoint works.
It's all right. Take it slowly. I've learned that.
So let's wait for a few seconds. Waiting. Is that all right?
Now you have to click that use slideshow button on the right hand corner. Remember?
Okay.
Next one, that's the one.
Okay, and can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
Oh, we've lost your slideshow. You must have closed it. It's all right. Open it up again.
Right, how's that?
Perfect.
Okay. Thanks, Erica. And just in case I forget, I'll probably be getting out some Waratah lay slides next Wednesday and dissolving them. So that's a special treat if you were able to come to the CMA talk. So it's really great to be invited to talk to the Materiality Agency and Data Research Hub. And so it's given me a chance to kind of think about the way that my thinking has changed through an engagement with the Magic Lantern. So I've called my talk Apparatus Thinking, and I've thought of several kind of cute little phrases over the last couple of years to try to encapsulate what I've been doing with the rest of the group. And it keeps on changing every couple of years, but currently I'm at Apparatus Thinking. So I'm just going to start, rather than giving you a big thing about the history of the Magic Lantern, start with 3 images that for me have been really important in crystallizing my thinking. And they will be the kind of leitmotifs of the remarks that I'm going to make. So this first image was actually used by Deirdre Feeney in a chapter that she did for our book, which came out of our Magic Lantern conference. And it's a drawing from the late 18th century. It's about 30 years after the Magic Lantern was actually invented. But it's the first drawing where all the different components are labelled, from the curved mirror on the left-hand side through the light source, all the way to the right-hand side where we have the wall on which the image is projected. And what blows me away about this particular image is that those components of light source, lenses, image are the same components that still exist today in the data projector. So they're still what drive the outdoor projections we see in Enlighten or whatever. They're still exactly the same configuration in a photographic enlarger, or if you change them around, you get a telescope or you get a microscope. So that fundamental optical sort of underpinning of our contemporary digital culture, having that going back 300 years is a bit of a mind blower for me. This is my second of my 3 kind of leitmotif images. This is a object from my collection. And I say object because, as you can see, it's a mechanical clockwork object, and that brass and wood is there to drive 3 painted images in a kind of an algorithmic motion, if you like to use that overused word, algorithmic. There's 3 layers of glass. 1 is still, and 2 pivoting on offset pivots. So the 3 layers of glass move in sort of distinction to each other as you turn the handle. And that creates, through the moire effect, another optical effect, the illusion of moving water. So that kind of combination of object and image, mechanics and illusion, which is there embedded in that particular object from the late 19th century, is also for me another mind blower. And my third leitmotif image, which I'm using in lieu of giving you a big boring history of the Magic Lantern, is this slide here, Magic Lantern slide, made in Australia somewhere in the 1930s. And I absolutely adore this image because it's Australian. I love the kids. I love their scruffiness. I love their bare feet. I love the fact that the guy on the right of the projector looks a bit like my father. And it's an enactment of a Magic Lantern show, as you can see, for a children's church. So the photographer has got in front of the screen, the wall we had 300 years ago has now become a screen. It's got in front of the screen with a flash on his camera, and told the kids to look at the screen as though they're looking at slides of Jesus. But some are looking at him rather than at the screen, and then he's blasted them with a flash. So he's actually reversed that kind of system we had before of light source and image, and cast a big shadow of the tasseled tablecloth onto the floor. So this, for me, encapsulates the importance of the Magic Lantern culture to Australia, to me, to us. And it took me, I'm a bit slow, it took me a couple of months to realise this is also an entirely male space as well. So it says a lot about Australian gender and gendered spaces. So they're my kind of three motif slides that I just return to again and again and again. And Erica mentioned about the grant that we got a couple of years ago. And when we were applying for that, I was thinking about two kind of umbrella methodologies. And they're still the umbrella methodologies that I still shelter under. But I think what's happened is that I've been able to make my own space underneath those umbrellas. The first you might be well aware of, media archaeology, very important way for me to think. And that's to not see media as being this endless procession of improvement leading inevitably to now, but being different substrata that are slightly different to each other, slightly heterogeneous, that lay on top of each other in uncomfortable ways, and that can break through and touch each other very suddenly, almost like a kind of geological upthrusting. And the second overarching umbrella methodology was actor network theory, popularised by Bruno Latour, pretty kind of groovy last couple of years. And for me, that is about putting people and technologies as actors, as active actors activating each other in particular socio-technical networks. So those two kind of umbrellas, I think, did structure the kinds of works that our team did with the Magic Lantern. So I'll just deal with actor network theory pretty quickly, and then we'll get to the media archaeology bit. And again, important images for me. So this is an image that's in every Magic Lantern book. It's like always the kind of image number one that you see. And I really hate this image because it's absolute bullshit, I think. This is an image that was drawn by a guy called Robertson, who had a phantasmagoria show in Paris in the 1790s. And he did it for his memoir. So it's propaganda for him. And I hate it because he completely occludes the technology that produces these phantasmagoric apparitions, and he depicts his audience as being completely overwhelmed and supplicate to him and his technology, which he then refuses to picture. So this kind of image really sort of annoys me a lot. But I'm much more excited by this image, which was found for me by my brother in the tin shed in Queensland of the uncle of his wife. So it's Uncle Raoul's image. It's been eaten, as you can see there, by Queensland silverfish, which are very, very hungry. Fortunately, we were able to rescue it before the silverfish ate it. It's now under Uncle Raoul's house in Queensland. I hope it's still safe, but I was able to get these photographs of it. And this is a Magic Lantern show in Balmain in 1883. So I went to art school in Balmain about 100 years later. So it's really great to see Balmain. This is an image by a opticians who had a big shop in George Street. and he's trying to sell his triennial lantern, which you can see there on the right-hand side. So we've got a great Balmain crowd, standing room only, a fantastic, huge magic lantern, a lectern on stage with a reader reading the reading, and on the screen we have one of the key effects of the 19th century, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. So we are seeing the kind of technology and the effect that would be producing by dissolving quickly between two slides, hand-painted slides, one of Mount Vesuvius before the eruption, the other one of all the lava spewing out of Mount Vesuvius. This other image is close to my heart as well, and in fact, when we were applying to the ARC, we sacrificed about 300 words of our 10 pages to put this picture in, and I'm really glad we did, because the picture, as you know, speaks 1,000 words. And this sums up, again, the role of the magic lantern in Australia and its connections to contemporary culture. The Salvation Army, 1896, brought their lantern outside from the Salvation Army building in Melbourne. There's a horrible pub next door selling the evil schnapps, and they've covered that advertising sign up with a sheet, and they've blasted the side of the pub with the pure light of God, with a hymn called Rock of Ages. And all the stuff, we have got the band there, we've got a salvo selling the war cry, we've got a journalist making notes, and we've got a kind of loose larrikin who's lighting a ciggy in the lower right-hand corner. So what I'm trying to do is showing these pictures is to show how for us, the embeddedness of this technology within networks, active network theory, how we thought that through. A catalogue from a shop in Melbourne with magic lanterns in the front window. And these are the kinds of things that were being sold then. So this is a multimedia package. It's a box of 8 slides you could buy for 2 shillings, which wasn't all that much money. And you got in the package a sheet with readings. So if you look at the cover of the box, it's the Junior Lecturers series. So this, what you might have got for your birthday or for Christmas, was an instruction about how you could become yourself a junior lecturer. So this is for children. So you open the box, put the slides in your toy lantern, project it for your friends, and read about Government House, Melbourne. So you could play at being a lecturer. What fun to be a lecturer. So this is actually technologically mobilizing basically young people, interpolating them into the ideological imperial worldview. Incredibly racist readings, quite reactionary. So although I am into databases and I'm into grids, this is an installation that I've got currently at CMAG of about 1/10 of my collection. What I'm always trying to do is to keep the individual files, if you like, to keep that sense that they are part of a wider network. So just to return to this slide here to refresh your memory, my kind of one of my mantras is that any magic lantern slide, no matter how humble, is material evidence that at some particular time, some particular place, some particular people collectively witnessed images, music and text that were activated together by some individuals within some social organisation to give those people an experience, persuade them of an opinion, or connect them to others. So that kind of connection of the material to the network. Why is that moving? So that kind of thinking informed the book that myself and Elisa edited that came out of our conference, where those words are used in the subtitle to the book, Witnessing, Persuading, Experiencing and Connecting. So now I want to kind of talk about the medieval archaeology umbrella. That's also been quite important to me. And going back to this slide here. So all this wonderful 19th century clockwork technology is there to supposedly to produce an effect on the screen. So this is some of my slides from the my show. So it's been really important for me to and for the rest of the team to actually do the projection on the screen. So I've worked with, as you can see there, Elisa, and in the background, Alec Hunter, a musician, and people who aren't there in the photograph, Heather Keynes, who is a full-on opera singer, and Karen Vickery, who is a actor, to produce shows where this technology actually has an effect, hopefully, on an audience. You can see there in the middle the two lanterns that we use, which are a dissolving pair. And you can just see on the left-hand lantern, there's like a kind of a feather shape, a kind of like a serrated cut shape. That's our batwing dissolver, which covers up one lens and then reveals the other lens, which allows us to do the dissolve. But myself and Elisa have also developed other techniques which produce effects on the screen. So we've got a technique which we call flicker fingers, which is fantastic, where we flicker our fingers in front of the lens, which produces a kind of electromagnetic kind of in between two channels kind of feel, which is a bit out of historical sync, but who cares? It gives a great effect on the screen. We have another effect which we call cardboard Ken Burns, which is a big bit of black cardboard with a hole in it, and that allows us to sort of spotlight and to vignette different parts of the image. So we're sort of manually molding that cone of light. And if anybody's ever worked in a dark room from larger, they know the joys of that. And we're kind of assisting the apparatus to have its effect. So when you actually put this in a lantern and show it in front of a screen, you actually hit several obstacles which you don't know about until you actually do it. The first obstacle is that it fell apart. So fortunately, I work at the School of Art, so I was able to get Simon Ramsey and Sean Booth to put it back together again for me, and working with those workshops has been fantastic. Also with Nick from Sculpture. And secondly, that you can't keep the whole thing in focus, so that the focal plane of the lantern is quite narrow. The person who designed and made this was obviously very proud of themselves for making such a fantastic object. Never thought about it actually being projected. So you've got to decide whether you're going to pull the focus to the ship or pull the focus to the waves or somewhere in between. Those kinds of edges where things don't work, which is so revealing about how history works, you don't come across unless you're actually doing it. So I'm not trying luck by showing you any video, because that'll probably crash the computer. But the video of this being projected as part of a show is on our website. This is just 3 frames from the projection where you can probably see how the waves are moving. And we showed this effect as part of a much larger narrative, because we want to actually, as Erica says, and I'm glad that she got it, we actually want to give people genuine tingles down the spine, not fake tingles, but real tingles down the spine. So that's why we need opera singers, and we need musicians, and we need environments. We need all the bells and whistles to create that. So I sort of tell quite silly stories. So this is a story called The Terrible Voyage, and I have this image in my collection, which is a photographic copy of a print of a guy on a dock looking at a poster. And I got Waratah Lay, who's one of the world's best miniature painters, to paint me a tropical scene. And this painting by Waratah is like 1 inch high by ½ an inch wide, completely amazing. And I made that as a second slide. So I covered up the poster with a bit of black paper and covered up the rest of the Waratah side with black paper. So we were able to dissolve Waratah's painting from 2019 over this slide from maybe 1890 or something. We had a magical poster. So the whole trip begins with this guy seeing this tropical vision sort of flicker to life thanks to our use of the dissolver, which you can see on the lower left-hand side there. And then he goes to sea on all these boats, and I won't tell you what happens, but it doesn't end well for him, unfortunately. So all of this kind of paraphernalia is what I call creative reenactment, and it's got a purpose. It's a hell of a lot of fun, but it's also got a purpose to produce. I won't read all this out for you. This is just my own kind of aid memoirs, but to produce for an audience a kind of an effect, a kind of a frisson, a kind of a experience, which is in the present because it's using, say, electronic music, but it allows them to reflect on that experience, to be what I call an experiential object from an historical point of view. So it's not a straight reenactment like you would look at, you know, in a museum. It's not steampunk. It's not like a contemporary mise-en-scène with a kind of a steampunky flavour. It's an historical referenced event where you do get a genuine tingle, and that genuine tingle you can think of in the same framework as a 19th century tingle. And that media archaeology allows that because, as we've established, it's very similar fundamental archaeological, technological structures that we're dealing with, whether it's a digital projection or a magic lantern. So that whole thing that I went through there with the Waratah's paintings and the ships, we did late last year at the Cell Block Theatre, which is this amazing 19th century prison, 10-metre high walls, lots of ambience. But we did it in relation to the National Art School and the Power Institute, but also Sydney Living Museums. And it was in relation to a collection that is in one of their museums called Rouse Hill. And it's a long story, but that family purchased a magic lantern in the 1860s, which you can see there at the top left. And as the family went down through the generations, the final skin to the family was this avant-garde musician called John Terry, who did Pink Floyd style psychedelia in the basement of Rouse Hill House using the magic lantern from 100 years previously and using contemporary slide projectors. He also did psychedelia performances, happenings in the Cell Block Theatre and in the Wayside Chapel. So there was a little bit about that in the show. So we're also trying to be site-specific as well, and to activate the collection. So if you go on the Sydney Living Museum's website, they have a thing about the magic lanterns. It's quite good. And one of the sets that they had in the 1860s was called Pussy's Road to Ruin, which is a very popular child story. So because I spent a lot of time on eBay, I was able to buy an equivalent set of Pussy's Road to Ruin as they had, and were able to do Pussy's Road to Ruin again in the Cell Block Theatre, where John Terry had performed his psychedelia in the 1960s using an 1860s lantern. And Pussy's Road to Ruin is a pretty good story about a innocent pussy who's led astray by a dark tomcat. And again, it doesn't end well for her. As you can see in the final slide, she ends up in prison. Lots of Magic Lantern shows end very badly. So this kind of practice-led research and collaboration with artists and musicians and performers has for me been, the most transformative for me as a researcher and an artist. Nikki's here, and we have done stuff with artists like Nikki and Karen Florence, which I haven't put into this talk, but it's really great, and it is on our website as well. What they did. We did a show at Calthorpe's house, which again used Waratah, and again used this idea of site specificity, where we got Waratah to paint some slides of Calthorpe's house itself in a classic dissolving view way, sort of daytime and nighttime. So this is where the Lantern show was, and we dissolved it there before we went into the show itself. And Waratah, within her own practice, her own autonomous practice, has taken the idea of the slide off in her own direction. You might have seen her light boxes that she's been having. So after this introduction, we then sort of spin off into our usual site-specific experience. So the good thing about Magic Lantern slides is that often they're drawn and designed for special effects, usually for godlike special effects, but we blotted out the angels in this set here called Holy City, and we had Prue on the ground of a third lantern projecting mosquitoes buzzing around, which is a reference to Dawn Waterhouse, who lived in the house. Her husband was the guy that invented Erigard. So we can have lots of kind of fun and lots of site-specific connections. So this actually, has really led me to be much more focused about the way that I think about media archaeology. And I really enjoy this chapter here by Vivian Sobchak, who's a Californian film theorist. And for me, lots of what she says resonates with my approach, our approach. So she says, in representing the past, so the way that the past can be made present in the present. This sense of presence emerges from epistemological and sensual specifics, both material and structural, that are entailed not in theoretical or interpretive discourse, but in operative and necessarily corporeal practice and knowledge. That is, performative acts, which focus on what is done rather than what is represented. That resonates for me, obviously, with actually working the slides. And the other fragment, the other way of representing the past, she says, is a fragment or trace pierces an uncanny hole in quotidian temporality, not only by suddenly being there by virtue of being noticed, but, but also upon inspection by radically and retrospectively challenging and changing the accepted order of things, both familiar and strange. So again, hopefully that kind of feeling you're sharing a tingle down your spine with people from 100 years ago is that illusory effect. So I was talking about this actually with Kate Warren the other day about what I call experiential heritage. She said, oh yeah, but that's like when you go to a Holocaust museum and you get a number from somebody who's died in the Holocaust, and you have that experience. And I don't think it is like that, or when you go to a kind of convict museum and you get locked in a solitary confinement cell for 5 minutes. Because as Vivian Sobchak says, these approaches prefer to defer interpretive analysis and explanations, as well as the kinds of teleological implotments demanded by realist historical representation. So those kinds of experiences of having the name of a Holocaust victim sort of plot you in particular historical narratives. Whereas I think that what I'm interested in doing is trying to extract some effective experience from history itself, which can be reflected upon. But it's sort of great to talk to people like you guys about the kind of nuances of what I might mean by experiential heritage. So, but this is what I'm thinking at the moment. You know, we used to have, we still do have architectural heritage. We've got material heritage and tangible heritage. And I think that what I'm trying to grope towards is something like experiential heritage, as I've just described. And museums are kind of entering this sort of terrain a little bit. We've been working with ACME, which is going to be reopening early next year, and they're going to have an enlarged Magic Lantern section in their permanent displays. People might have seen the Alice in Wonderland show they did last year or the year before, where they had slides, because, and they also had a lantern in a Perspex box that was projecting a replica slide. So people are kind of, you know, within constraints of museological mise-en-scenes, kind of groping towards something like a kind of experiential heritage. And I think there's so much to be got historically from this approach if you can pull it off. So this is just one example. So these are some of my World War I slides that I have that were marketed. They're not official slides, they're commercial slides that were marketed commercially during the war. But then, I know it's horrible reading stuff, but I just want to look at this short article from the Newcastle Herald and Miners Advocate. And it's about a Magic Lantern show in Killingworth, put on by Mr. Simpson, the headmaster. And he went around with his camera and he photographed images of fallen soldiers out of the paper. He photographed images of living soldiers from their families. And he photographed war pictures, copied war pictures. So he's involved in this, you know, right-clicking. He's right-clicking, getting all this stuff in his Magic Lantern. And he also went and photographed scenery around Killingworth. And then he puts on this amazing bricolage experience of the war, where first of all he shows the portraits of the soldiers who are still alive, who are fighting, who people know. He showed images of the fallen soldiers, and I just cry because it's a beautiful use of technology to create a local community event, and if you know we can kind of grope towards something like this memory within our museums, it'd be so much more effective, I think, than the kind of normal war memorial propaganda which we're getting at the moment. So obviously this text comes from Trove, so there's lots of great ways of using Trove that you can kind of triangulate the Lantern slides that you have, that you find with the experience of Australians. So another example is this is an American set of a cowboy song. So I produced in America, kind of proto Hollywood. The people who are posing for these slides became sort of Hollywood film stars. It's 1908, I think. But they were also shown in Australia. So if you just go onto Trove, you can see that these slide sets were shown with local singers in Charters Towers and in Melbourne. How am I going for time, Erica? Okay, all right. Just stop me with.
No, you're doing good. Keep going.
Okay,
Great.
all right. So yeah, I should have put in some of Nikki's work and some of Karen's work and some of other people's work. But I mentioned Waratah before, and the way that she's kind of taken the idea and has run with it. And so this is a dissolving view set she did of her own home. So this domestic again, like we had with the war before. Her own home in Cooma during the day and during the night. And it's great for ordinary people like above at our conference to actually do the dissolve themselves. And this completely blew my mind when we saw it, because Waratah has painted in the daylight scene, she's painted the inside of the house black. And that becomes a kind of black screen. So when you do the dissolve, her bright yellow in the nighttime slide appears first on the black. So it's almost like somebody's come in and turned the light on before the sun sets. It's quite an uncanny effect that Waratah was expecting, and I wasn't expecting as well. And that also only happens when you actually do it, when you are collaborating with people that have more talent than you do. Do you kind of begin to understand the actual lineaments of both optical and pigment technology? And Waratah can expound quite elegantly about the issues she had with not only getting the pigment to stick, but the fact that pigment is made for light reflecting off it rather than light transmitting through it. So she had to really modify her palette so that it would actually project well. Other people that we have worked with as part of the project have been Kieran Brown, who's a computer coder and a engineering honours student through that hook up with an engineer program thingy. And I haven't talked yet about chromotropes, but everybody loves chromotropes. They're a revolving kaleidoscopic effect, which gives a 3D effect of pulsing colour on a screen. Again, you can see them on our website. So we had, first of all, Kieran algorithmically coding chromotropes. So he was able to code quite complex chromotropes, which were impossible to manufacture, but looked really great on his Instagram account. But I also wanted to reverse engineer a 19th century mechanical clockwork apparatus with a 21st century algorithmic code, which we were able to do. Kieran coded up a much more simple pattern, and we made it with the help of the engineering student in the ANU Makerspace, good old Makerspace. Again, we ran into problems with transmission of light versus reflection of light. We initially chose, I think, blue and red, but they cancel each other out to make black. So we had to choose a different colour space, or your CMYK colour space, to actually have two colours making a third colour. So that's our red and blue chromotrope, which makes black, and it's being projected there on the screen. So that was kind of, I guess, good to sort of demonstrate again the kind of archaeological substrata of one technology underpinning another. And Kieran also did a thing with a video I had made of a chromotrope. So you turn the handle and get this kind of like pulsating spheres of light. And he applied an AI process to each video frame, with the AI predicting what the next video frame might be. And it was kind of like historically weird, because it went into this kind of 1960s psychedelia very, very quickly. But presumably you could tweak the AI to control that. So doing this actually been quite good for us because we found, me and Lisa and the rest of the team, that a lot of journals and books, they're sort of desperate to make their publications less boring. So they really like to have this kind of stuff in. So we did a report on Kieran and Waratah for the Early Popular Visual Culture Journal in their portfolio section. And that works really well because it's not very hard to do. And you've got to kind of deal with their poor reproduction qualities, but often they have an online version as well. So we did that with using Kieran and Waratah. And again, me and Lisa did mainly a creative portfolio in a book published edited by Anna Sophia Jurgens about a conference that she did about circus. So again, it's a few hundred words from us, but pages of our slides. And Mitchell and Jeff got us a gig in one of the online publications that they were doing, where Elisa reported on some work she'd been doing of taking our shows that I've talked about before and using the videos of our shows as an interface into our digital database, which I haven't talked about yet, but it's there online. So doing all this practice research is a great way of, without too much effort, getting your stuff published in referee journals. So just to kind of focus down on this apparatus thinking and to return to those issues of the things that don't quite work. And that's been something that I've really just recently tried to kind of think about. So I showed the two lanterns that we used before, and I had pulled them all apart, was able to pull apart the lenses. The lenses that were used were what we called PET4 lenses. They were free elements of glass designed for photography, for portrait photography, to get as much light in as possible because people moved in front of the camera very early on in the piece, about the early 1840s, but adopted by magic lanternists because you wanted to get as much light out as possible. But they had actually very poor resolution at the edges, very bad spherical aberrations. There's a kind of compromise. The repairs I did didn't work, it fell apart. So back to Simon Ramsey, who repaired my lantern with rabbit skin glue, and it hasn't fallen apart since. But working with people like Simon and Sean that actually have this knowledge, encoded into the actual muscles of their arms has been really great. And thinking about what doesn't work. So the big problem is you've got wood and metal and glass, three completely incompatible materials that are meant to work together. So the wood swells when it sucks up moisture and the cogs jam, the cogs break, and Sean was able to actually weld another cog on me, which was amazing, and get the things going. And so you realise that this was an industrial process, a mass-produced, sold all over the world, but there was still a level of kind of approximation in the way that they were mass-produced, probably made in kind of like virtual sweatshops. The colouring was done by poorly paid women. The design was probably designed by men, but as I've said before with the previous slide, the men didn't really carry it through to how it might look on screen. So lots of issues that I think resonate with kind of garage manufacture and kind of hacking culture today in our contemporary in industrial space, where you've got the big conglomerates, and then you've got the handmade culture, and you can see those two things in different ways, but in sort of like resonant ways, rubbing against each other in magic lantern culture. So just kind of display that. This is a slide I've got, which is a beautiful slide. It's of the solar system. As you turn the handle, the planets rotate around the sun. And this is a slide that was invented by a guy called Carpenter, a shop called Carpenter and Wesley. Then it was kind of pirated by Newton and Co. And it was sold for like 60 years. It was sold as a set, astronomical set. So it's not actually as rare, although they're really expensive to buy. So you've got that kind of complete global packaging of a particular effect, a bit like the Our Colony slides I showed before. But then they get broken. So a lot of slides I buy, somebody 100 years ago has dropped them and they've smashed, and then they get repaired with tape, and then you have to repair them. So you feel yourself, you're in this kind of lineage of making doers, and it doesn't really matter once it's on the screen how kind of cack-handed your repair is. So I love finding previous repairs like this tape by previous, probably now long dead magic lanternists. This is one of my favourite slides, because this is an amateur slide. So somebody has brought a slide from a shop, the glass has been broken, and they've replaced the glass and they've drawn their own hilarious painting of a boy vomiting. So this is like half amateur, but with act into a industrial frame. And the crowds, when you show it to contemporary crowds in Canberra, they just love it. And I've added, as you see there, I've added my in to out. That's my writing, because I've got to remember what to do in the dark. So I have to modify the slides for me and Lisa as well. I love this slide. This comes from Kyogle, from a museum in Kyogle. And slides were shown from the bio box here, crowd control. So I love that this exasperated projectionist in the Kyogle Odeon has got out his pen and has made a modification to the brought slide. And don't know when this was done, because these kinds of slides were shown right through to the 1970s in theatres. And I'm being a bit naughty here. This is another one of my favourite sets. This is for a children's lantern, and they're quite crudely painted. But I swear that somebody has just modified the L on lockout just a little bit. So there's some kind of engagement with the materiality, brings you up to the front line of history in lots of interesting ways. Okay, so these are just some of the kind of examples. If you go to the show, that you'll be able to see. It's great working with Elisa and with Alec and Heather and Karen, and we often think of new things to do together when we're developing a show. So I had 2 skeleton slides, and we now do this kind of skeleton dance together, which is in our shows. And I think that this is what Lanterners have always done. It's always been an improvised activity, and it's performing technology. So these are some of the slides that don't look like much as objects, but when you project them on the screen and you have Alec playing his iPad with sound effects and Heather going full opera, it actually is a very effective experience to have the kind of lightning bolt and so forth. Me and Waratah and everybody really loves how paint falls off. So of course, keeping paint adhered to glass is a huge problem. So slides like this with paint falling off are really great projected with moving eyes and a moving mouth. It's going to move on. I mentioned before about chromatropes. They're on display in my show. But they come in these kind of wooden armatures, and other Latinists have left their marks on the slides. I'm still working. I really love Gordon Bull's voice. I love his northern glottal stops. So a couple of years ago, Gordon read some of readings for me, which are online. So for these, we didn't do a show, we didn't project them. We just used the digital scans. But Gordon read, this is a temperance story about a barmaid that trying to inveigle the last shilling out of a drunkard, and his wife's at home in a bare room, and but finally he realises that he should go home to his wife, so he tells the barmaid he's not going to spend his last shilling, goes back to his wife, apologises, and they live happily ever after, which is a good happy ending to a Latin slide. So it's great working with people around, and I want to do more work with Gordon in the future. And this is a slide I'm working on at the moment, which is would have been shown in like temperance halls. Amazing set, life model set, incredible hand-painted backdrop with these kind of two really weird disappearing points, and these kind of almost like a kind of Samuel Beckett play tableau of people ignoring this child. So I'm trying to think of different ways of collaborating, different ways of kind of keeping the pot bubbling, because putting on a Latin show is quite expensive to do, unfortunately, and not all that many people want to do it. There's just some shots of my show that closes in a week's time, as Erica says. And I think I'll just finish, just to remind you, before we can maybe have a discussion. This is the website that is still up, and will be up hopefully, hangs off the art school. And the videos that I've been talking about, you can click on the videos collection, you can see them there. We've had the database that we built in order to play with is still there as well. And Elisa's experiments with the generous interface is there as well. That's the video collection. And that goes back quite a long way as well. We've asked people to write about their favourite slide from their particular point of view, and that's been, really good with keeping people interested. We've also been visiting collections, so that's now kind of paused, but there's quite a lot of there to look at. So I think I might have talked for long enough. Erica, do you reckon?
Perfect.
So I'll stop share, and then I guess if anybody wanted to make any comments.
Yeah, so if you want to ask a question, or if you can't, if you're lagging with your broadband, you can type in a question in the chat too, and I can read it out. So if anyone's got a comment or a question.
Walter.
Well, I thought I'd start off by just asking you, where do you go from here? What are you thinking about next? You must have seen so much along the way.
Yeah, that's a really painful question.
Sorry.
I think I mentioned before kind of ruefully about our eHive database, which was part of the project, and we did build, and it's but a lot of projects build databases that then go off and just become frozen, or if they're on, we've got databases that were on microfilm or microfiche from 20 years ago, and it's quite hard when you get a discovery project, unless you can parlay that into something else. So in one sense, it's kind of stopped because the project's finished, and it's now just there for as long as the art school cares to host it. And if I get energy, I might put more things on eHive, but you've got to keep on paying eHive as well. And then it's just up to your own energy. So as I said, putting on Lantern shows is quite expensive because you need to pay musicians and pay actors, you need to hire portaloos and hire tents and stuff, and then people don't actually come as well. The core team of myself and Lisa and Alec are still working on getting some shows going, which would be, really, really fantastic. I am still collecting and still thinking about maybe smaller scale things that I can do to kind of just keep the pot bubbling over. But collaboration is really energizing. So, if it wasn't collaborative, if you didn't have people like Waratah or Nikki or anybody, you just think, fuck, then you would have given up years ago. So as I think, as we all know, as academics, it's so much is about your own energy and getting little nibbles and just working on those little nibbles. So hopefully there'll be some more shows in the future, and hopefully I'll be doing things.
Yeah, the shows are really worth seeing. They really are amazing. And Carolyn has said, thank you. I look forward to seeing the show. Will there be a performance at CMAG with singer and musicians?
Right. No, because I can't afford it. But I'm going to, unlock the case, Waratah. You don't know this, but I'm going to do a dissolve of Waratah's 2 Calthorpe slides. I guess there's a kind of art economy. People, it's nobody's fault, but museum budgets are set up for a particular kind of a thing, and then just not set up for what are, to me anyway, reasonably time-intensive productions. You need transport and so forth, and we have done it, and everybody's like happy and think, "Oh, that was great," but then that's, we've done it now. Thank you, goodbye. So the thing we did in Sydney was supported by the Power Institute and by National Art School and by Sydney Living Museums, but I've done it now, so that's them, finished with. Unless wait for 10 years and
roll you out again.
Yeah.
But what I find really fascinating about your project, and as research, is how interdisciplinary it is. Yes. And that's something that you've talked to me about before, is this idea that, there's this perception that when artists and art historians apply to larger grant bodies, they don't have much success. But actually, when you look at the kind of projects that do get forward, they do have really extraordinary interdisciplinary outcomes. And that's something that you've actually created as part of this too, haven't you? There's history, history there.
Yeah. I think the practice of research bit's really got legs. Look at Robert and Christina's things, or look at Elisa's DECRA. I think that assessors are looking for that facet of difference, and that facet of this is roll your sleeves up, real. And certainly they're also looking for interdisciplinary teams. As I said to you before, Rebecca, inter-university teams and international teams as well. So and I think that that's being borne out when you look around at the few, I know it's hard going, but the few grants that are going out, and also connecting to outputs that might make sense to institutions like museums, and so that's why we have heritage in the title. Yeah, but it's not just in order to, it's not just window dressing. I mean, it is really energizing, but keeping it going. So Kieran Brown, he did his thing, which is great, but he's gone to other things. So yeah, but I suppose that's fine, But yeah, but keeping it going is quite difficult.
I have a question, Martyn.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really interested in your idea of experiential heritage, and I think that's a hugely overlooked aspect of, historical study. But although I think it is something maybe people are looking at more, but they might not have necessarily put their finger on the term. And I feel like you've got a good term there.
Yeah, I googled it, and I don't think anybody's used it before.
Well, yeah, claim it.
As that couplet, yeah.
I'm just wondering, what do you think that would look like? I mean, I know, as you said, museums sort of often try something like that, but it can be quite diluted. Very funding and interested parties and all that kind of interference, I suppose. But how do you think that might look in an ideal situation, in an ideal world?
Yeah, well, when I did Google experiential heritage, the word is used in the same, two words are used in the same sentence by a lot of heritage theorists, but it's what Vivian Sobchak calls emplotment. So it's like I was saying, you have an experience like a Holocaust survivor or like a convict, which then gets plotted into the larger narrative of the museum. So I think it does look like that. And another, you could think about music. So I can think about what it's not. So I don't think it's that kind of experiential emplotment. And then you think about somebody might go along to a Baroque, concerto by Bach, played on period instruments and with catgut strings, and have an oral experience, similar to what would have been Bach would have heard. But I don't think it's like that either, because you're in this kind of, fine music, classical music.
You need the right context, don't you?
Land. So you don't have that reflection. So it's that reflection on the experiential object. Like, I've just had a tingle, which might have been like, somebody had the same tingle 100 years ago. And then so then you could all put on Bach wigs, but it's not like that, either. So I think I can only define what I mean by sort of saying what I don't mean. So I think it is the experience which is not emplotted in a large narrative, but also allows a reflection. And coming from art schools, we were taught to reflect all the time. It's all we do is reflect, but then allows a reflection on that experience. So that's what I think it is, and I reckon that's probably what our shows have, approached, particularly when it's also got site specificity there as well. But that's kind of hard to sell to a museum.
Yeah, and it's hard to, it's always been hard to put experience in context. When you see all of those stereoscopic photographs and you see lantern slides in extensive museum displays underneath glass, they kind of become dead, and it's made me really wonder, because you've brought the magic lantern to life, and I now have it in my mind, and it becomes a much more active object rather than a dead one. I sometimes wonder now how many of them I've missed looking in op shops and over the years where I've just passed them by because they haven't meant anything to me in an active way, that they're so obsolete that I haven't even thought of them as a kitsch object. And even when the image is not that interesting, you're bringing it to my experience or to my attention has made me imagine what even those poor objects would look like blown up. And
without having to, you kind of get to know.
It's really, it is quite fascinating. That the experience becomes quite palpable in that way.
I mean, I think that, well, I talked about stereos, but I think the stereos is a obvious candidate for something like this experiential heritage approach, because it happens in your brain. It's your two optic nerves meeting at the chiasmus and producing an image. So it can only happen in an individual's brain. But we know that it was so important to a 19th century person's sense of themselves in space that they went on these tours, sort of proto tours, which are marketed by that company in America. But we know how many there are in op shops, stereos. We know how many are in collections. And of course, we do know that archaeologically we have cinema and now virtual reality kind of laid on top. So we know this is really important, but it has to be produced in an individual skull, and that is a massive challenge. That's why you only see half in a book. Or online, you might see the two side by side, but it's not it, But we know how. That's why reading out those newspaper reports, when you just imagine those kids singing to images of people they knew who had died, there wouldn't be a dry eye in the house. So. So that's why I think we've got to work on ways of making that happen.
It's actually quite interesting because in my course Art in the Digital Age, Katrina Sluice from photography and media arts, she gave a lecture on net art this week. And she actually showed my students, because she's been part of the Rhizome website and the archive, she looked at the net art from the 90s and where they've actually preserved the look and feel of those old systems, the original internet look and feel. And that was really quite a powerful presentation to give to, the digital generation, because a lot of my students are born in, the late 90s or early 2000s. So, to look back at those early archive, interactions with the net also reminds me of the way that you're looking at the lantern slides too, like particularly with that sort of, that you can't look at that early net art through new internet coding, because that would change it completely. And even the slowness of the way that the images appear towards you, and the concept of a GIF and all of those kind of things. Yes, it is quite interesting to consider that visual culture and how we archive it and how we restore it and experience it. And
and I found from my students I used to have, my digital students I used to have a couple of years ago, they had an enormous historical sense. It only went back like 5 years, but they were into 8-bit and 6-bit and within a, to me, quite a constrained time frame, they actually did have an enormous kind of historical nuanced sensibility, and they would have loved all that kind of stuff. So I think that it's not a new versus old, and that's what I've always tried to avoid, like the plague. And that everybody, even your most diehard gamer, and they do have an extraordinary interest in the bit depth of two years ago, which to them is enormously
they can see how it's
different. And you might, when you were talking about Katrina's thing, I was itching to maybe get a kind of console from the 1970s in my hand, and not that I used to, but the kind of the actual kind of physicality of the thing as
you want to play Pong, don't you?
Well, I did, yeah. And there are media archaeology labs that have in Colorado that have lots of different computers and so forth.
Yeah, and it's not steampunk, like you say. It's not this sort of trying to hark back or to have this groovy edge. It's really about thinking about how things connect and
and I think like young digital artists, they do reflect on previous versions in quite a sophisticated way.
Yeah, it's amazing. Has anyone got another question or comment before we let Martyn go? Oh, Carolyn says, does the hand-painted quality add to the experience? It's like hand-painted animation. Is the colour light different somehow, the film compared to digital images?
Yeah, for sure. That's why we don't try to avoid digital projections as much as possible, but the digital colour is quite different in its quality to the painted colour. You've got the pixels, obviously, but the kind of the yumminess of the colour is quite different through a 120-year-old lens. And what Waratahs had a lot of experience with painting and then projecting and painting and projecting, but because you've got this medium, oxball bladder medium, whatever, and then you've just got this pigment sort of sitting there. And contemporary audiences love it when it begins to peel off. So it kind of cracks as it dries. It kind of pulls apart and cracks, and that adds this kind of toofiness to the projected image. So the more kind of cracked and peeling it is, the better the punters love it when you project it. And you can and I think digital, maybe it's just me being romantic, but I think digital does have less of that kind of sense of volume to it. But Waratahs had got a lot of it's quite hard to do, quite hard to paint, I think. she's nodding, and it's amazing how little work's been done on presumably the women who did that painting, and we look at some of the paintings that we have on glass, and it's just gobsmacking how detailed it is. So their control of the medium and the pigment was quite extraordinary.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's not just. I don't think it's just me being romantic and wanting to do everything old school. I think there actually are optical differences between a pixel diode pixel from a data projector and light going through lenses, going through pigment in a suspension, which is quite it can be up to about 1 mil high of a medium.
I would add to that I think when people see magic Latin projections for the first time, they really do go, it's magic. And we don't have that response to anything digital anymore. We go, yeah, that's cool. But there's something really extraordinary and delightful and unexpected about magic Latin slides. And so all of those qualities that you were just talking about, Martyn, are really true. And, you know, there's nobody who sees magic lantern projections and goes, yeah, whatever. Like, everyone just goes, oh my God, it's magic, it's amazing. And yeah, it's always good.
I really, what I got from it was the sort of suspense of humans behind the apparatus. That it wasn't just about the apparatus. You know, because, you know, in the digital age, everything's so slick. You know, we're looking for those slick points all the time, and there is that kind of lack of mistakes, and that's why we love glitches in things, because it looks so cool, and it does have that, you know, feeling about it. And so when I've seen your performance, I love it that you're sort of huffing and puffing, and you can feel the tension of between you and Elisa going, you better
I get really,
put that.
Elisa's as cool as a cucumber. I get really anxious and worried, and I'm never smiling because I'm always freaking out. But and then Elisa's always kind of quite calm and she keeps me. But then you do hear the clunk, because we've got to get this 150-year-old bit of wood. We've got to actually shove it into a magic lantern, and we've got to shove it between two brass tin surfaces with a spring, and we've got to go clunk to actually get the thing in. And then to actually get it out, we've got to go clunk as well. And then when we're doing the flicker fingers and stuff, and we've got to, each one is in a different part of the focal plane, so we've got to refocus each one. It is. There's certainly a kind of theatre of worry on my part and coolness on Elisa's part.
Yeah, Lisa looks
which
great.
and Lantinus were, as we saw from the shot, the drawing from Balmain, Lantinus were in the middle of the audience. And if you read reviews, the reviews are always about how bad Lantinus was and how you couldn't hear them and how the gas ran out and how they were out of focus and so forth. So it was, before the bio box, which came in 1890s, it certainly was in the middle of the audience. The apparatus was there.
It used to catch a light too, didn't it?
Yes, indeed. Yep. Well, you got oxygen and hydrogen and a flame in a big latex bag. Yep, something's going to go wrong, and it did. And the smell of gas. So in our upcoming book, out in a few months' time about Newland, there's lots of accounts of audiences running from the theatre with their noses covered because of our leaking gas. Yeah,
or on fire.
That's right.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Martyn. Thank you and everyone for coming tonight.
Yeah, thanks for coming, guys. It was great.
Yeah, it was really fabulous talk and so informative and thought-provoking, and I just have so many ideas now. It's great. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Okay. Well, don't forget, I'll crack out Waratah slides next Wednesday, and the show finishes on Sunday, and the website will be up there. The pleasure of the art school, I suppose.
Could the pyrotechnics be part of the next show? No, Carolyn, we're not allowed to do anything like that anymore. Okay.
People, we could do a crowdfunding thing because,
yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Good night.
See ya.
All right. Bye.
Bye.